Though written 3,000 years ago, Ecclesiastes' ancient wisdom speaks to us today. As the teacher has himself explained, things never substantially change. Which is why, when it comes to finding answers, it matters to the teacher and to us today that the most painful realities of life are addressed. For the teacher, this involved looking injustice in the eye. It was clearly rampant in his day, for he writes, "In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there." The very places people look for justice, the courtrooms, are sites of prejudice. And the teacher describes the effects of such injustice. "I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead, who had already died, are happier than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun." The teacher sees no one to wipe away the tears of victims. He sees the strong crushing the weak and no one protecting the powerless. It's so unbearable that he considers the dead and unborn lucky for being spared such misery.
It's bleak. Yet isn't the teacher describing our world too? From our privileged position, many of us may not feel the force of the teacher's agonized cry. Yet some of us have seen such injustice we sometimes consider the unborn the most fortunate people in the world. What about the damage done to the world's most vulnerable and powerless people? Is there any hope? If there's no God, then the answer must be no. Just like the animals, says the teacher, perpetrators of injustice will eventually die. And in a godless universe, that will be that. As one dies, so does the other. All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. Yet isn't it fascinating that we place standards on humans that we'd never place on animals? As we watch an animal ripping apart its prey, we may find it sickening, but we're not angry. We know very well that nature is red in tooth and claw, that in the animal world, the strong eat the weak. Yet when a human acts as a predator, we cry out for justice.
Yet where does this instinct come from? Yes, the existence of evil can make us wonder if God is really there, but the opposite can be true too. The fact that evil is being perpetrated, and the horror we feel as we watch, hints towards the existence of, or at least our need for, a God of justice. In a godless universe, the wickedness of the predator and the kindness of those serving their victims are reduced to the same level of insignificance. One group harms while the other heals. But what's the difference if there's no one to judge between them? Because unless there is final and absolute justice, the kind of justice our deepest instincts do cry out for, then every human action is rendered meaningless. Only an all-powerful, all-knowing, entirely fair God can ensure that justice will be done. And the teacher knew this to be true. He writes, "God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed." Even the very best human initiatives for justice inevitably fall short. There are those whose cries are unheard, whose wounds are unbound, whose pain remains. We must look to eternity if justice is to be done, fully and finally.
As says the teacher in verse 20, "All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upwards and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth?" Perhaps the teacher isn't quite certain about what comes after death. More likely, he's indicating his despair that so few people are aware of the judgment ahead. Most are simply unaware of the eternity that stretches out before them. And it's this very lack of attention to eternity that can cause injustice to flourish. If we think of ourselves as gods, in control of our destiny and able to construct our reality, we can become like the most predatory of animals. Freed from moral accountability, we can always find reasons to justify abusing the weak. But, says the teacher, know this: justice will indeed be done by God, once and for all.
1,000 years after Ecclesiastes, another human court turned justice on its head. Jesus, the Son of God, was cruelly executed by those who'd acknowledged his innocence, while at the same time Barabbas, a terrorist who'd killed many innocent people, was set free. We are right to conclude that Jesus' death was the greatest travesty of justice the world has ever seen. It was indeed an evil act perpetrated by wicked people. But that is not the full story. For though unjustly murdered by people with evil intentions, Jesus died willingly, bearing the cost of everything unjust that has ever been done, even his own murder. Jesus' death was the greatest sacrifice, the purest act of love, and therefore a higher act of divine justice than the human injustice it represented.
That makes Jesus' death a word to the abused. What has been done to them matters to God. Jesus' death shows he would never sweep the guilt of their abusers under the carpet. And it's a word to the abuser too. Whatever they have done, they can be forgiven by God, if only they will cast themselves upon his mercy. It's right that we commit ourselves to justice. But Ecclesiastes warns us that this side of God's judgment, injustice will run rampant. And at times we'll wonder if humans are any better than the most vicious animals. But do not doubt, in a world in which injustice can make everything seem meaningless, there is good news. God's justice really will be done.